Hello everybody, Poncianinho here, speaking from Brighton, England. This is vlog number 12, okay? Now, I am excited about this vlog today for a few reasons. Do you know, sometimes you practice something for many years and you know some things, you practice and you know some movements and you've practiced movements a certain way, you have the idea as well because you heard stories. And then sometimes, even though you know that, you still get a eureka, you still get a bing moment that you didn't think in that way. And sometimes all of those other small experience, boom, goes together into one big revelation. And I literally got goosebumps now talking about this, literally, because yesterday, in my class, I did one movement and I had this really powerful thought that really inspired me. And I wanted to do a vlog yesterday, but I couldn't. So I woke up and I said, I have to speak about that today. Okay. Now I put the title of this vlog as Torto. That's Torto. Now Torto literally means bent, like as in bent, like that, when you bend something. Now, of course, I say that and you can already start to think, I think I know where he's going with this. But let me try to give you some points on this. I think capoeira is very unique. One of the reasons why capoeira is very unique, it's because of this idea of bend, being bent, bendness, okay? Now, if you listen to Mes Pastinha's album, there's a point where he says, in my time I was capoeirista, but there were other capoeiristas and they were so bent, like nature could not make them like that, as if given the idea that they had to acquire that, they've learned how to be bent as they went along. Let me see if I can find for you, because it's actually fascinating to hear this. So he said that in my time I was a capoeirista, but there were capoeiristas that were bent, so bent that nature didn't make them. Now let me tell you why this thing was a revelation yesterday. I did a class yesterday, and I did a movement that goes into something like this from the ginga, and then from this there was a rasteira. So I bend this way, that's all good, we do a lot of that already in capoeira, right? I bend this way, and then I rasteira that way. Now the first thing to think about that is, of course, bending this way will generate momentum to go that way. That's already for me a very interesting, inspiring point already. Like a bow, right? If I pull a bow this way, the bow is literally bending this way. When I release, the energy goes that way and the arrow goes that way. However, I think I took that an extra step, because I bend this way, I didn't just release that way the movement, I carried that bendness into the movement and I release at some point. But the point is, I carried that torto, and it gave a revelation for me of the malandros, of the cultural heritage that we have in Brazil, in that side of Afro-Brazilian body, and you can just imagine the elements, the social elements, everything that allowed that to boil, allowed those capoeiristas from that time, the capoeiristas from the ghetto and from the urban capoeiristas as well, to have this body language with them. Now I know we spoke a little bit about this in another vlog, that I gave some examples that my father used to talk about, the way people fight in the old days, where they were like malandros and all that, but I'm taking that a step forward now. So I wrote some points here that I would like to talk about. So first is the cultural heritage of that brings us back to Brazil. Now what I'm saying here is that it is great to practice all of this. But if you think back then, if you look, if you study, if you watch the masters, if you understand more of that history of this movement, of this way of moving, you will add so much to your practice. Because you can't just bend and go and fake the movement. But once you know the source, that passion is going to increase so much. I suppose it's like saying if you are a flamenco dancer and you go back in time and you study the roots of flamenco, and then you can start to make some serious connection of why the expressions are like that, and then why do they get better or got worse at some points, because I do think that this idea in some places have been lost, or maybe not lost, but maybe we didn't think about so much. So what I'm saying is, might not be good enough to just bend. Well, it's good to practice and it's good to start, absolutely, but there's more to it. There's more to think about as you bend, because for me, doing one movement this way and doing a rasteira that way, and then doing the same thing but carrying that idea throughout the movement, has changed the way I approach it. Just imagine as a whole how much more we can get from this. I also wrote, I think this is very, very advanced way of moving. If you think about other cultures of movement nowadays that have that quality, they have this really malandro, clever, cunning way of bending, you find that not many activities nowadays have come up with this. Some have, and I'm using movement now, I'm not using culture, okay? So I'm not comparing them in terms of culture. But you have something like contemporary dance today that really do use a lot of bending and a lot of things there, out of its natural, say natural, but out of kilter, out of focus, blending, blurry. So contemporary dance use that, and it's, compared to capoeira and other things, fairly new, but it does that beautifully. But all of that study, not so many more cultures have come up with something like that. What I'm saying here is to say that I think that what they did back then, this ways of moving the body, this cunning way of saying, please don't do, so you move almost like, I'm going to use the word pain now just to make you understand, but this almost this hint, this quality of like, please don't, and then come back to something else. It's very sophisticated. Also, because in capoeira we use this idea of the bow that I told you, the metaphor of the bow bending this way. But when we release, we actually go somewhere else. That's the power of it. You bend, you build that thing, and then you release somewhere else. You even release the bow to defend. Oh, how amazing is that? We don't just make a bow to attack in capoeira, we also make a bow so then we can defend beautiful as well. So just really taking that metaphor of the bow and arrow to a surreal level now. The other point I spoke about this is, I mentioned to you about Mestre Pastini, speaking about that, it fascinates me. I am such a deep lover and such a huge respect for the legacy of Mestre Pastini. Of course, I am a baby in capoeira, a little dot in capoeira. But I have always been in love with the philosophy of great masters, and I met some of Mestre Pastini's students, and it was a dream of mine to, actually I'll tell you a secret, when I realized I was deeply in love with capoeira, I remember saying to my father, that actually didn't happen, but I wanted for my birthday, I wanted to go to Mestre Pastini's place where he was buried, very connected with the legacy that's left behind, which I know very little of, but I know the little that I know, it's enough to make me feel very much in love with that. Now I also make a point that torto, however elegant, so there is a craft to it. That you can just bend in a way, and when I say bend, guys, I'm not talking about back bend, forward bend, twist, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these fuzzy places, these areas where the movement are you cannot trace the movement so well. You have to do, it's a real craft. No wonder why it might be difficult for some people to teach, because it's a real craft which I'm trying to refine more and more to how to teach that as authentic as I can. It's a hard craft to teach. And we can start with simple mechanics, of course. Think about, this is not a conversation for masters, for great capoeiristas, because if you understand some of that, one of the movements that most have this from the very beginning of your practice is Ginga. Ginga, it has flow, we spoke about flow, but it's bending. You're bending here, you're bending there. You can be torto. Anywhere you stop. I remember classes where we used to stop in a Ginga. Now I think back, I'm thinking we were exercising how to be torto. A lot of people think stretch your hip flexors. A lot of people think I'm increasing my back bend. I'm increasing my... Okay, you are, but now I'm thinking different. I'm thinking I'm practicing an elegant way of being torto, of being bendy. That's what I'm practicing for capoeira. Can you see how it gets us more earthy? Can you see how it gets us more into our, again, I just remember now my school, the floor of my school. I just remember all these elements that makes me feel more as a capoeirista, as an art form, and not just as an activity. So there is a craft to it, and that craft can become very simple from Ginga, but again we have to study back there. We have to see the motives, the feelings, and then watch again and again and again, so we can start to replicate that. I'm doing a deep work at the moment to start understanding this more and more, so I can present that to my students in a way that is, again, beautiful, elegant, and that it works. Because I think when it works, it really works, But you have to practice nowadays. Because as I said, the bridge that we make is practice. If you're not born there, if you didn't have that for whatever reasons that you're born with, you have to practice. I'm in the same pile. So these are some elements about this. Now, again, I said they are, again, subjective and easy to lose. This could be something that if we don't think about in practice, now I don't think we'll lose that, because as I said, there are many examples nowadays. I'm talking about the old mess, but I can give you examples of people nowadays that have that beautifully and sophisticated, and I know we're going to carry on forward, and I just told you I'm teaching my students that, so hopefully in 10, 20, 50, whatever years, they will be doing the same and teach someone else, absolutely. But yes, these are easier things to lose in terms of cultural resistance than a squat, or than an exercise that stays there because they work or they simply, whatever it is. But they are these movements that requires a big understanding in terms of its craft and also of its past, may be easier to lose. So we also have a responsibility, I feel, to propagate this, to talk about this, to be inspired by this, right? So yeah, these are some of the points that I wanted to talk about to start. Now, I gave you some examples here, more or less, trying to fake what I did yesterday in my class, but if I can get one thing from this vlog, is that you, again, get inspired by just the idea, the idea that twisted branches, bendy branches, all of these metaphors that we can take from the idea of being bendy, cunning, traceless. All of these ideas will give you now an inspiration to go to practice in your house, or to go to the studio that you practice. Of course, if you're a teacher, I hope you like that, and you want to, or you can tell me you already been doing that. Of course, I think all capoeiristas do that. I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying I'm doing a revelation of something that hasn't been happening. I'm saying I had this epiphany from a combination of things that just made me actually narrow a little bit more what I'm doing and think, oh, I definitely need to work on this more specifically and get deeper into this. You know, I look videos and I look classes of even my teacher from the past, and as I told you, we were doing all of that. But explaining, looking in a different angle, trying to approach a different way now is giving me a bigger warmth to the idea. So I'm telling you this so you would go and actually try to explore for yourself as well these movements, all of these elements, you know. Perhaps even nicer than if I gave you a sequence now. Like, okay, I explain all of this about being bent, now let's try this, which is great. We're gonna do that. Tonight I'm gonna do that in my class, you know, and we can share that. I can post something, oh, I've done this, guys, look at this. What do you think this is good? What do you think about that? But it's the idea that you will stay in your mind, you know. Let me use a cliche just to explain that. You know, the first time you hear the thing about being water, like from Bruce Lee, you know, he hasn't given you a sequence, he hasn't told you, now let's put that into this choreography, but just because he said to you, be water, my friend, just gives you, almost gives you everything that you need to already start to work, you know? So it's like I'm telling you now, be bent, be torto, but as I said, elegant, you know? So all of these will combine, the fluidity, the flow, the bendness, they will combine, but it wasn't enough for me to just say capoeira bends and we twist the body and we bend this way. It wasn't enough because it would stay in the movement area. I had to bring the fire underneath that boils that, and that fire underneath that boil that is nevertheless the culture behind. The movements that come from that. So guys, thank you very much. Now, I haven't asked you this before, but I found out yesterday that the reason why people ask for likes is because the more likes you put, more the videos get spread. So if you enjoy the video, please help us out and spread the news, okay? Finally, I would like to say that I appreciate these videos are in English and they are not in Portuguese, and I've been asked from a lot of people, which I feel quite humble about this, because people in Brazil are asking me to do this video in Portuguese, and to be honest, not that I'm comparing English speaking community to the Portuguese speaking community, but it makes me feel really good that now people are listening and going, actually, can you translate all of this, because there's another community that wants to hear that. So I am going back into my vlogs and thinking about a way to do this beautifully. Will it be to put titles, or will it be to do all over again in Portuguese, which certainly will inspire me, because I do miss sometimes, you know, of course, all the time I miss speaking my language, which I do often. I teach a lot in Portuguese now, more than ever. My beginners sometimes go, what was that? And then I see someone else translating to them, and I love that sometimes, because I'm speaking Portuguese and then I've got my students who did not speak Portuguese now translating to another student that just arrived, and that is great. Okay? Thank you very much, guys. Have a good week. Um abraço para todo mundo. Tchau, tchau.